Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm participating in another secular collab video. This one is hosted by Suan from Life in the Trenches. I'll make sure to link the collab playlist down below. So if you're new here, I have a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And so we have 5th grade, 1st/2nd grade, and preschool. This is our third year homeschooling. So the topic for this video is the highs and the lows of homeschooling, which I think is a great topic to be discussing because I think there are both highs and lows. So luckily Suan provided questions for us to answer, and I really appreciate that. It makes it a lot easier to formulate my thoughts in these types of videos. So let's get into the highs and lows. So the first section is the highs of homeschooling. The first question is, what's the most rewarding moment you've had as a homeschooler? So we're in our third year homeschooling. I would say there's a specific moment where I'm like, this is awesome, because again, I think there's highs and lows. For us, homeschooling has never been like an upward path. It's always been more of a up, down, which I think is pretty typical. So the most rewarding moment, I think, would be just having the knowledge that my children are growing in an environment that is suited for their needs, but also is full of acceptance, and they can be who they are. They are becoming the people they're meant to be. They're not feeling pressure to be a certain person or act a certain way. They are not valued based on whether they get, answers correct on a worksheet. That I'm able to provide this really enriching, accepting environment where they can grow into the people that they are meant to be. And I think that's just wonderful. That's been the most rewarding feeling I've had as a homeschooler, is that I can provide that right now for my kids. And it's great to see that personal growth, not just academic growth in my children, but personal growth. Imagine growing in an atmosphere where you're accepted for who you are. Things are tailored to what you need them to be in order to have your best chance of success in different subjects and different areas. And yes, there's struggles and frustration along the way, and learning to persevere through those. But having this amazing environment, imagine if more people had this environment to grow into the people they're meant to be. It would be like, what could you do with that? You could do so many things as a person if you had that environment. So I think that's been the most rewarding moment, realizing that they have this really great environment that they are growing into, becoming the people they're meant to be, and that's the best part of it so far. So number 2, how has homeschooling strengthened your relationship with your children? So I think that homeschooling is just an extension of parenting. So a lot of the things that have been strengthened were already there, but are just reinforced because my kids are with me all the time. So some of the things I think that have been strengthened is trust, respect. So with trust, my kids rely on me to provide a well-rounded education. I'm a big believer in having academically rigorous, but also academically sound resources. So they expect me to bring my best self to the table. And in return, I also expect my children to try their best. And that is a relationship that existed before homeschooling. There's always been clear expectations in our home that we all have responsibilities. This is yours, this is mine. But I think it has enhanced that in a lot of ways, that I trust, especially with my oldest 10-year-old is getting into more independent work, that I'm able to give her more leeway in her work and trust that she's able to schedule her things. She has opportunities to show me that she can do more independent work. So really that trust between us, that relationship has really grown, and I can rely on them to do the things. And there's no squabbling, there's no pushback. I mean, there occasionally is because they're kids, but that trust exists between us, that I trust you to do your part, and they trust me to do my part as their educator. And that goes with respect too. Respect is just, and it's not, do what I say when I say it. It's that they see value in themselves. They don't see value, their work isn't who they are. They have value as individuals. That's something that I'm really keen on, not only in my homeschooling environment, but my home in general, that my children understand that their opinions matter to me, that they have a voice in this world. And that's one of the reasons we go over different subjects like social justice and history, to realize that there are things in this world that are hard, but they have the ability to change those. That even at kids, they have a voice, and that voice matters to me. So having a lot of open communication, I definitely think homeschooling has opened that up so much more, because again, I have to rely on them to do the things they have to do, and they have to be able to vocalize, okay, I'm having trouble with this problem, Mom, or I don't understand what's going on. They have to be able to vocalize that to me. At the same time, they need to be able to share their opinion, because their opinions matter to me. They have value just as individuals. And that's one of the things I focus on is I try to see my kids as individuals, not, an extension of me. I don't want them to be, just like me, think exactly like me. I want them to be their own people. And homeschooling allows me to provide an environment where they can blossom into whoever they're meant to be. But I really want them to understand that they are valued and they have opinions that matter to me. So open communication has really been a great thing in our homeschooling. So number 3, can you share a moment when homeschooling made you feel incredibly proud? So again, there's not just one moment I can narrow it down, but I can narrow it down a moment for each of my children. So for my oldest, and this happened recently, most of these are recent, but she was working, we got a book from the library book sale, and it was the entire tales of everything Beatrix Potter wrote. And it was Peter Rabbit and all the other animal stories and everything like that. And she was looking through it, and it inspired her to create her own story. So she decided to write kind of a prequel to Peter Rabbit about Peter Rabbit's mother and father before they had Peter Rabbit, and what their life was like, and where was Peter Rabbit's father. So she spent time just writing out. And one of the things before entering homeschooling is my daughter was definitely reluctant to write, and we've implemented IEW, and that's really helped. I do have a review on that up above if you want to see it. She's currently in the level 2 of it, but she was able to formulate all her thoughts and put all the stuff in there, but she was doing this for fun, her free time. So she researched the different characters in the book, and she put them in her story, and she put her own personal voice, her own narrative into what happened to Peter Rabbit's father. And then she drew her own illustrations for it using some of the pictures she saw in the book. And then she created this world all of herself. And it was her very own kind of more gothic take on it. It was wonderful. And then on top of that, she's like, hey, Mom, can I type this up and we can copy the pictures in? And I said, sure, but it's probably going to take you a while, because the story she wrote was 2.5 pages, so front and back, and then another page. And she's a very beginning typer. She's still taking typing lessons, and said, okay, but it's going to take a while. She's like, that's fine. She spent over an hour typing up this paper that she wrote, and I helped her insert the pictures that she drew using, the printer to copy it in. And it was just amazing that in like 3 hours, she had created this. And it used every aspect that she had learned in homeschooling, her writing, how to structure paragraphs, sentences, but also her creative voice, artistic talent. It was just different skills she learned came together, and she was doing it for fun. So that was a moment I'm like, yes, that's a win. So with my 6.5, almost 7-year-old, her winning moment would be just that she is unapologetically herself. And that's one of the things I'm most envious of her, that she doesn't care what other people think. And some of this has to do with just her personality, but also I think the homeschooling environment really nurtures that. So she has ADHD, she has celiac disease, so she definitely has some struggles along the way, and there's definitely a lot of opportunities in her life for her to feel singled out or ostracized because of different things in her life, but she doesn't see things like that. She has a very positive outlook. She has her own thing, and it's amazing, and she doesn't feel the need to conform to what other people think or want her to be. She's, like I said, unapologetically herself. And I think this homeschooling environment, because I am able to cater things to her or allow her to move when she needs to move, that so much of that, I think, would be squashed if she was in an environment where she had to be a certain way. And luckily, homeschooling provides us the opportunity to really nurture who she is. So that's my most proud moment, when I see those moments where she just does her own thing and doesn't care what anybody else thinks. So with my youngest, his proud moment would be just when he started homeschooling this year. Now, my son is very rambunctious. He's bright, but he's mischievous as well, which is sometimes a difficult combination. So I assumed when he started asking me to start school, because I was actually going to hold off another year with him, but he really wanted to start. So I started preschool with him with the same program I used with my oldest and my middle child, and I was really surprised with how well he did with it, how well he listened, because he's not the best at listening. So I had really anticipated some pushback, some struggle with him, but he loves it. He loves learning. He loves having his own stuff to do. And I guess that's just my proud moment that I underestimated him. Just because he's a crazy wild child didn't mean that he wasn't ready for school or, actual sit down learning. And I'm just really proud of him being able to take that step. Because especially since a lot of time people tell you boys mature slower, and especially younger ones, it's better to hold back a year. No, he was ready to go and go for it. And if it were just up to me, I would have waited another year. But he was able to vocalize to me and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm ready. Let's do this." So that's my proud moment for him. So number 4, what's one subject or skill you were able to deep dive into because of homeschooling? So that would be history and social justice. So history is something I have really been able to deep dive into, and in our homeschool, we focus on multiple perspectives in history. And that's really important, especially since coming from a public school setting, I was given a very narrow view of history. So being able to relearn a lot of this with my children has been amazing. And to see them understand the connections of the things we're learning, even my 6.5-year-old, almost 7-year-old, the connections, because we use core knowledge, introduces history in very early levels. I'm talking like kindergarten and above. They're learning about ancient civilizations. They're learning about the War of 1812. They're learning all these things so that they can each year build upon it. And I've seen those. We were playing a trivia game with a bunch of people, and one of the questions was, what's the oldest civilization? And without hesitating, my almost 7-year-old said, China, ancient China. And I was like, oh my God. So it's amazing to see those moments where they retain information. But history has been really eye-opening and interesting for all of us. So that's something I've really enjoyed deep diving. And that also relates to social justice. Having a good understanding of the history and then being able to deal with some of the issues in the world today and how those are connected, to make those connections of history and social justice issues that are existing today, that existed back then, that have been perpetuated sometimes generation through generation, but they're able to make those connections, and I love, those are my 2 favorite things to go over with my kids. But we have definitely deep dived into both those areas. So number 5, how has homeschooling allowed you to cater to your children's learning needs? So for my oldest, she definitely dealt, coming from the public school system, and I think just in general, she deals with more anxiety and perfectionism. So luckily, the homeschooling environment helps us work on a growth mindset. But like I said, also having an environment where it's not about getting things right, but about the opportunity to learn, that mistakes aren't failures, but opportunities to learn. So she's really blossomed into that environment, and that's how I'm able to cater things for her so she doesn't feel that anxiety or pressure. For my middle child, she has ADHD as well as celiac disease, so she can't have anything with gluten, which you might not think would be difficult, but in certain settings, especially public or private school, think about art supplies. Yeah, she's not eating them, but clay sometimes has gluten in it, something we've encountered. And yes, she could wash her hands, but she's also sharing workspaces with other children. They have snack. A lot of public school activities have food-based things. Like I know when my daughter was in public school, they had holiday parties, they had gingerbread house making kits. Those would be all things that would be difficult for my daughter if she was in those settings because of her issue with gluten. So I'm able to do all those things at home, and we do a lot of those with our co-op, our holiday parties, but she never feels left out or ostracized because I'm the one bringing the food and planning the things, and I love that. Party planning is one of my favorite things. The only thing I miss about public school was the holiday parties they would have. So being able to bring that into our homeschool has been great, but it's an environment where she feels so welcome, and that's wonderful. Same thing with ADHD. Her brain works differently, and being able to provide in an environment where she can move, she can take breaks, that it's best, although it's difficult, yes, especially since this is my first child that's neurodiverse that I'm dealing with, that it does put a lot of, I have to learn the best strategies, but really ultimately it's helping her learn better. And then with my youngest, again, being able to move at his pace. He's ready at 3.5, let's go. Same with my middle child. She's higher leveled in math, but probably at level with language arts. So being able to adjust where my kids' needs are academically has been really great, because none of my kids have been everything exactly on grade level. They're either up or below or whatever it may be. So being able to adjust as needed has been really great. Number 6, has homeschooling allowed you to be more flexible with your family's schedule? Any examples? So yes, one big thing is my husband. So when my daughter was in public school, she didn't get to see her dad a lot. If you're new here, my husband's a pastor and he doesn't have like a 9 to 5. He obviously works the weekends. Sunday is a work day for him. And he has a lot of late night meetings. He has a lot of, if somebody's hospitalized or sick, he goes. So he's always kind of on call unless he's on vacation. And most of the time his vacations didn't align with when the public school vacations were, because obviously my husband's working around Christmas being a pastor. My husband's working around Easter or spring break because he's a pastor. So one nice flexible thing is I've been able to schedule our vacation time around his vacation time. So we have an entire week that we're all home together, which is really nice. And one of the reasons I chose to be a stay-at-home parent is because I knew my kids wouldn't see their dad a lot because of his demanding schedule. So I wanted them to have at least one solid parent always home with whatever they need. So being able to have that extra time with him and actually enjoy family time has been great. Same with being able to choose our schedule. So we do the Sabbath 6 weeks on, 1 week off. It's not always 6 weeks. Sometimes it's 7, 8 weeks on. But we have a rest every month, 2 months, and it's been great. We have that week off. I can plan, I can prep. They can enjoy just doing whatever they want. So being able to have that rest time scheduled in has been great. So there's been a lot of positive things about the flexibility that homeschooling allows. So number 7, what's the best field trip or hands-on learning experience you've had? So that kind of goes with number 6. One of the things we're able to do is twice a year, we do a museum pass and a zoo pass, and we go twice a year to each of those. So usually we go to the zoo in the summer, and then they have a Christmas lights festival show during the month of December. So we go during my husband's time off, and then we switch which museums we do. Sometimes we do aquariums, sometimes we do planetariums, but we wouldn't be able to schedule those visits if it'd be like a jam-packed summer. And again, my husband only has a certain amount of time off, so being able to schedule that with a more demanding schedule like in a public school setting would be really hard. So every year we go to the zoo twice a year, and we go to different museums twice a year as a family, and it's great, and it's something we've done the last 3 years since we started homeschooling. I'm really excited that we can get those enriching experiences, and that my kids will have memories of going to all these different places and these different learning opportunities. So now let's go over the lows. So number 1, have you ever felt overwhelmed being both a parent and teacher? How did you handle it? Absolutely. I think being a parent has its own struggles, but then you take on your child's education. That's a whole nother level of pressure and a time commitment, and it's a chunk of your time you're losing. So how do I handle it? So the thing I've learned to handle it is to schedule time. So yes, I schedule a lot of my time because I'm not just mom, I'm not just a wife, I'm not just a homeschooler. I have obligations outside of homeschooling. I do run a co-op, I do work at my church. So there's a lot of things I'm a part of, and there's a lot of things I want to be a part of. And also I want to make sure I'm taking time for myself, because I am valued just for being me, not just all those roles. So I have found the solution to that is just having a really good schedule. So I schedule time for myself. That's Sundays after church. I have a video link up above what I do on Sundays to kind of recharge myself and nurture who I am as an individual, but I also schedule planning and prepping time for homeschool on that week off with our Sabbath schedule. I'm taking care of that. Yes, am I resting, but also taking a day or two to get the next 6-7 weeks prep. So balancing that, I have found just a really good schedule, but also allowing for flexibility. Obviously things happen, sickness happens, different family situations happen, but having a basic schedule that everybody knows the flow of everything has really been helpful. So number 2, what's one thing you wish you had known before starting your homeschool journey? So I guess I wish I would have known that you don't have to know all the answers and that you just have to have a willingness to learn. So I was very apprehensive in the beginning because like I said, we are very academically rigorous in my house. We have a great value for education, and I do have a video of why I value education so much. I'll link that up above if you'd like to see it. But I take education really serious, and I was really nervous in areas because obviously I'm not, especially with math, I think a lot of us struggle with math. I had a lot of math anxiety from growing up, and it's just not the best subject for me, and I was always told myself I was bad at it, and I'm like, how am I going to teach my children math when I struggled so badly with it in school? And getting over those fears, realizing that I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to know everything. I do have to find resources, credible resources, to learn this information. So for example, with math, I'm learning alongside my kids. We do Singapore Dimensions math, and I'm learning so much more than I ever did. But also knowing when to reach out and ask for help or to outsource things, I think is really important. So with math, I bring my husband in sometimes. Sometimes he teaches the lessons because he's does really well with math, and that's one of his areas he strives in. So bringing him in when I need him to explain something to me or explain something to the kids, and not having that fear that I can't do it. I can. I have to put the work in, the research, making sure I'm vetting the resources I'm using, making sure they're credible, all those things, but I can do it. You don't have to have all the answers right away. You just have to have a willingness to learn and to realize there are things along your journey. You will only learn along the journey. You can sit here and watch videos of veteran homeschoolers telling you about things, but until you are on your journey, you're not going to realize it. Just like parenting, before you have kids, people will tell you things, you're like, okay, and then you have kids and you have a whole different experience, right? And that's something that's unique to every homeschool. Every homeschool is unique, but every homeschool child is also unique. My 2 kids, my 2 daughters, are completely different. So you don't have to know everything right away. You're gonna learn things as you go, and that's just part of the journey. It's also one of the great things about the journey. So number 3, was there ever a subject or topic that you found difficult to teach, and how did you overcome the challenge? So I kind of already alluded to that. Math was the one I was like, oh my God. And I do think math should be taught so I'm not a big fan of math being taught through video lessons or like teaching textbooks or things like that. I do think math is a conversational subject that you can approach math problems in many different ways, and it's about seeing the patterns and not so much just solving the equation. So one thing that really helped me, and I'll link this above, is the Mathematical Mindsets book. That really kind of changed my view on math and my abilities to teach math and how overall we were approaching math in our homeschool as well. And it really eased a lot of that anxiety and helped me realize I can do this, but also reaching out for help. So if you struggle in this area, what resources can you do or use to better educate yourself so you can present that with your children? So that's how I overcome my math issues. So number 4, can you share a moment when you questioned your decision to homeschool? I questioned my decision to homeschool probably every few months, and I think that's completely normal. You're never gonna be completely, this is the best choice ever. You're gonna have doubts, which is completely normal and part of the journey, and it shows you care, which is a good thing. So some recent doubts I've had. When my 6 and 7-year-old was diagnosed with ADHD, I had a really question about, can I do this? Am I equipped to help her? She was my first experience having a neurodiverse kid. My first child is very much like me, so it's very easy to teach to her. My second child is completely different, and her brain needs different tools that I wasn't equipped to help her with. And again, looking into those resources, seeking out information, learning for myself to best help her. Again, you don't have to have the answers, but you have to have a willingness to learn. But that is one situation I was like, oh my God, can I do this? Am I the best person to do that? Because overall, my biggest thing is I want to provide the best education for my children, and I'm not too proud to say that might not be me someday. So with my oldest, at the moment, I was like, oh my God, was recently. So we were doing a end of the year review for Dimensions Math, and she was getting a lot of them wrong. And I was like, oh my God, like, did we miss it? Like, she went through the stuff when we were doing it, and it seemed to work. Why isn't she remembering it? Is it the program? Is it the curriculum? What's going on? Am I messing her up? And again, it wasn't any of those things. And I think a lot of people knee-jerk to something's wrong with the curriculum, it's not working, but there's other things going on. She's a preteen. She's going through a lot of changes. She's really tired. And I just realized she was having kind of one of those down days when she was doing these review prompts, that she was just tired. She was growing. She was irritable. It was okay. We can come back to it. She didn't forget every single thing she learned. Something I learned recently, that especially in the middle school years, you're going to see a little bit of regression because a lot's happening with their bodies, especially their brain, and everything's growing, and it's okay, again, not to have all the answers. So those are recent ones where I'm like, oh my God, am I doing something wrong? Next one. Number 5, have you faced any social stigmas or misunderstandings about homeschooling, and how do you deal with that? So I guess the only one I've really had issue with is I am a Christian, specifically Lutheran, specifically the ELCA denomination, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around that. So I am a secular homeschooling. Our faith is not part of our homeschooling, it never will be. And my children are free to explore different faith practices, and we do go over different faith practices in our house. It's never you have to be Christian in my house. So I face the problem where I'm not Christian enough for the Christian homeschoolers, and I'm way too progressive. And I am not secular enough for some secular homeschoolers, because not only am I a person of faith, my husband's a pastor. So when you tell a secular homeschooler, oh yeah, my husband's a pastor, they're like, deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, she's crazy. So I've dealt with the misconceptions on both sides of those, and how I've dealt with it is I do talk about my faith on this channel. I do talk about my faith with people to realize that I am not some hard conservative right-wing person, that you can have a Christian faith and be very progressive and inclusive, and I think that's shocking to a lot of people, but there's not just one voice of Christianity. There's a lot of different denominations, a lot of different doctrines out there. So again, providing multiple perspectives and talking about secular resources, and that they're not horrible things, but also, bringing perspective of both of those groups, I think, is how I deal with it. Number 6, how do you handle the lack of me time or self-care while juggling homeschool? So I already answered this. I scheduled me time for myself. I make sure I am doing enriching activities. So I'm a part of 2 different book clubs. One is through our church, where we talk about different religious books and kind of our faith practices, and it's just a really good spiritual growth for me. I am part of a book club at the library, where we talk about young adult children's books and just getting together with a group of people. Also, part of our co-op, it's an opportunity for parents to get together and talk about their life, because we do need that connection as adults as well. Homeschooling at times can be very isolating, and you do need a community, you do need a group that you can lean on, whether you're struggling, whether you have questions, or whether you just need somebody to talk to. Having that social outlet for yourself is very, very important. So, number 7. What's your biggest challenge in keeping homeschooling engaging for your children? So I'm definitely not one of those homeschoolers that thinks everything has to be fun or pretty to do it. I think there's times we're going to go over information that my kids are going to be bored with, and that's completely fine. But I think there are ways to make it engaging but still get the work done. So for example, with math, something I recently did was, we do dimensions math, but like I said, we were doing that review week, so I brought in some core knowledge units. I've never tried their math before. I've tried their science, their language arts, never their math, and I really liked how they were structured by units, and each year had kind of like the end of the year review. So I pulled some of the pages, and it was more like real life math, so my daughter got to design a tiny house, like do a little blueprint, and she had to do a material list and add up the cost and stay on budget, and then she had to research certain furniture she would want in this room and how much that would cost. So she was using all these things she learned in math in a real life situation, which was really nice. I've already talked about history and social justice, about how we relate it today, about how history isn't something that just happened a long time ago. Something I talk about my kids, especially with social justice, is why is it important we're learning about this? I want them to understand that it's very important today, that just because what we're learning about doesn't affect who they are in their certain group doesn't mean that it's not important, that we all need to be working together to make this world a better place for everyone. And same thing with literature. I'm making sure that I'm bringing in lots of different perspectives. Like I said with my daughter in that paper she wrote, she was able to take all of these skills together and make something of her own. So making sure I'm bringing in different perspectives, different ideas is really important to me. And that's how I'm making it engaging, because everything we're learning about has to do with real life. Math, you're going to be using that in real life. Showing my daughter, it's not just equations on a page, but again, it's all these other things. Math is all around us. Literature is all around us. That's how we get different perspectives, ideas, different voices in our head. Science, how the world works. So it can be really engaging. You don't have to do all these little fun things, little craft projects and experiments. Just going over how all these things work in the world is engaging in itself. So that's how I just present it. I'm not concerned about making it fun or pretty, but how you present it, that this is something that's explaining how our world works, and that's really interesting. So that is all the questions. If you have any questions about anything I said, leave them in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching, and make sure you check out the other videos on the Collab and see what everybody else said.